Forge FC is ready for their upcoming match.
Simply stunning stuff! And finally, their goal! My word, what a rocket!
Now, let's get you up to date with Anthony Urciuoli and Match Day Preview on the Forge Audio Network.
Hey, Forge fans, it's the Forge Audio Network. I'm Anthony Urciuoli. This is Match Day Preview. Thankfully, we don't have to dwell on that Vancouver match for too long because Sunday at Tim Hortons Field at 6 o'clock, Forge FC hosting one of their newish rivals as of late last season, Atlético Ottawa, a club that Forge has had a ton of success against. As for the previous match, normally I do a quick recap of the last one. Here's your recap. Forge Vancouver, they played Tuesday night in Vancouver. Vancouver FC, the worst team in the league. They're an expansion club, right? I'm not trying to be mean, but that's the reality, okay? The reality of being an expansion club in this league. Statistically, in almost every category. At home, they were giving up almost 3 goals per match. Not a ton of talent in their defense. A very young team. In fact, the average age of that starting lineup Tuesday night was around 21. So that's fair. They didn't even start the match with their best player, Hundal. He didn't come on to the 60-something minute. Having said all that, Forge FC lost 2-0 in what was very close to not a must-win in a literal sense, but let's say it was an important match for them. An opportunity to turn the page on what's been a very difficult stretch, and they lost 2-0. And all in all, here's your recap. It was pretty awful. I mean, if you listen to the match in review, I went live immediately following that match. It was just after midnight. So I was already going to be cranky as it was. But no, look, it would have been a disservice to what we do to come on here and try to paint some kind of a picture of everything being rosy after a performance like that. We can talk about possession all we want, all of these things. At the end of the day, those are stats that are nice, but don't mean a whole lot when the results have not been there consistently over the last few weeks. So I'm not going to try to paint that performance, that result as anything but terrible. I'm just not going to. Having said that, where there is a positive is when we pull back the lens a little bit. So let's think about this for a moment. We're all aware of the pedigree on this team, the talent. Some of the most, literally the most prolific goal scorers this league has ever seen are in that Forge FC lineup. The same players that are taking the field this season are the same ones, in large part, as those players that took the field last season, championship team, year before that, finalist, even the year before that, and before that when they were back-to-back champs. So this is where I will give you your silver lining, because here's the reality. This is a mental battle right now, and that's actually good news if you're a Forge fan and if you're a player and you're a coach. It's not a question of talent. It's not a question of can these guys get it done. Of course they can. There's not even a doubt in my mind. When the issue is mental and it's still early-ish in the season, maybe we should stop using the word mental because it comes across as, but let's say psychological is maybe a better term to use. It's, just covering my bases here. So psychologically, this is a psychological issue. That's really good news, believe it or not, because it's happening. We're not at the midway point of the season yet. Plenty of soccer left. Forge right now in a playoff spot, which when you think about it, as far as I can remember, and I don't know, maybe somebody has a different opinion, but the track record of this club. I don't ever remember a stretch this bad. Just when you look at it holistically, the results haven't been there. They've had trouble scoring. Even when things weren't going well, at least they were scoring. That has dried up. right? They've lost 3 in a row. They haven't won in their last 5 matches. They haven't scored in their last 3 matches, which is kind of unbelievable. They've played Vancouver twice. Vancouver has given up 2 goals per match this season, 3 goals per match at home. Forge has played them twice, and they have yet to score a goal against Vancouver FC somehow. I don't know. So at the end of the day, this is something psychological. And the reality is, it is made worse by the fact that this is a proven team and there is a ton of pressure and the expectations are so high. So when you look at this and you go, how can a veteran team be just battling it so hard mentally? This is why. This is a club that puts so much pressure on itself. The demand, not just in results, but just on the field, tactically the demand. Excellence is expected, and that is a little extra pressure. That's there's a cost to being this great. The expectations are higher. There's less room for you to not get the results. So if anything, a club like this will be battling it psychologically even more than a young team would, who, if you're a young club and the expectations weren't very high, it's very easy to move on after a mistake or whatever the case may be. If goals aren't coming, it's a little easier to kind of stick with it and just kind of go through the motions. But you have guys on this club that there's just excellence from top to bottom. And so the expectations on themselves are higher. Whatever your expectations are of these players, I can assure you that you can multiply it by 10 if you would ask them individually and what they expect of themselves. So we don't need to belabor the point too much. Here's the reality. Results not quite there, but 3rd place in the CPL table. They're giving up some matches in hand, but at the end of the day, and I kept going back to this in the match in review after that Vancouver game. The nice thing about having a smallish league with not a ton of teams is that, yes, you're giving up some matches in hand, but you're all playing each other. I mean, in other words, you're more in control than you would be if it was a 30+ team league, let's say, or even a 20+ league team, because you don't have as much control. You're not playing everyone as often, but they're still in control. They can still beat these clubs that are chasing them and who they're chasing. And the sky's falling. If you look at fans' responses on social media, and I do read them all, sometimes unfortunately, but I get sucked in sometimes. And the sky is falling, yet they're in a playoff spot and there's still plenty to be played left. And this is a club that has a proven track record. So I have zero doubt in my mind they're going to battle through it. And here's the real silver lining in this. They are going to be better because of this experience. There are pitfalls to success. You become complacent. You sometimes you need that negative feeling. That feeling you get, that uncomfortable feeling you get, it's a motivator, right? It's there for a reason. It is a motivator. And when this club, and I'm telling you, you can come back to me if things don't turn around. I have zero doubt in my mind that they are going to battle through this and be better for it. And by the time, whenever that day comes, right? I think it's a lot sooner than you may believe. I don't make predictions often on these programs, but I will say that I think we are going to see a different team on Sunday against Ottawa than we've seen the last few weeks. It's just a hunch. I feel like that Vancouver match may have been rock bottom for the season, and I think that's actually good news. So, all right, I'm done playing sports psychologist here, but I'm not going to sugarcoat what's happened recently, but I will be the optimist going forward. And I'm not just saying this, I promise you. If I didn't believe it, I just wouldn't say it. I truly believe that we are reaching that turning point, and this club is going to be stronger because of these, because of this turbulence that they've experienced. Okay, so listen, we're going to be joined shortly, by the way, Gordon Smith, one of my favorite guests. He is the color commentator for Atlético Ottawa on TSN Radio out in Ottawa. He's going to hop on very, very shortly. But before we get there, just some housekeeping here to get you updated on what's happening, the numbers, the stats. I mentioned Forge in third place with 16 points. They are truly, if you look at the stat line, they have been truly mediocre to this point, up to this in terms of results. They are 4-4-4. You do not get more mediocre than that. And Ottawa, on the other hand, they are at 9 points. So they're 7 points back of Forge. And head to head, Forge is 10-1-2 against Atlético Ottawa lifetime. So they're also playing a club this weekend that they've had a lot of success against. And what better way to just in terms of motivation, you can recall hoisting that trophy, with Ottawa looking on. So many examples of just positive experiences against Ottawa for Forge FC. And the home record has not been good for Forge this year. 1 win in 6 home matches this season. There's an extra layer of motivation on top of everything else to get the job done on Sunday at Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton. On the road, Ottawa this season, 7 points in 6 matches. And all right, that's all the stats we need. We don't need to dig too much deeper. It is what it is. You're all well aware of what's going on. There's nothing more I can teach you at this point. So let's go ahead and bring in our guest, Gordon Smith. All right, Gordon. Well, it's rare that, it's interesting. We've talked a lot. I think it feels like hundreds of times, not in a bad way. It just seems like no, not in a bad way at all. It seems like in a weird way, it feels like these two teams have played each other a lot. But I guess when you consider the playoff matchup and then the Canadian Championship, so they have played each other quite a bit over the last several months or so. But I don't know that there's been a time where Forge have been kind of the more desperate side going into a match where the struggles are real. They haven't scored in 3 matches. They're coming off a very, very disappointing loss at Vancouver, who, Vancouver had been giving up 3 goals per match at home this season, and Forge get shut out. So interesting dynamics heading into this one compared to some of our other chats, I guess.
Well, it's really funny. You look at the 3 teams we just talked about, Forge, Ottawa, and Vancouver. So Forge comes into TD Place, beats Ottawa 1-0 on a basically last-minute goal. Ottawa then beats Vancouver 1-0 at home, and then Forge goes out to Vancouver and loses 2-0. So it's almost like this weird triangle effect that nobody seems to be wanting to take charge of things. And when you look at the actual standings as of right now, heading into sort of 2 big games tonight, Pacific really seem to be the team that's separating themselves a little bit after that big win against York. And I think they're 5 points up now. They've got a sort of game tonight. I think they play Halifax this evening. So yeah, it could be a real, by the time Sunday's game rolls around between these 2 teams, Ottawa could be, I think they're at 11 points right now. They could be 14 points behind or so by the time kickoff is on Sunday, and Forge themselves could be a fair number of points behind Pacific. So it certainly is. Forge did go through a wee bit of a sticky spell last year, if I remember right as well, sort of mid to late in the season, 3 or 4 games where results just weren't going their way. Ottawa didn't really experience that much last year, and this season has been a real stop-start, as we've talked about in previous. They've now won 2 home games in a row, though. So, a lot of fans, certainly a lot of the staff and a lot of the players are hoping this is the big sort of kick-off to their season. But once again, against the game against Vancouver, it was lots of possession, lots of penetration. I think it was something like 17 shot attempts with only 5 on target. And that right there just sort of indicates where this season has gone wrong for Ottawa, is putting the ball in the back of the net. And yeah, you could probably say that about quite a few teams this season, Anthony, but as you're aware, I'm only concerned right now about Ottawa, and unfortunately, we're just not scoring at the rate that the chances and the quality chances we're getting really should indicate and dictate.
And it seems like this is the third time we've chatted this season alone. And each time we've chatted, though, I mean, Ottawa has gotten a little better, at least in their play.
Yeah, they have. I mean, all you have to just look at is that, it used to be, you looked at this Ottawa team and it was, defensive, sound defensively, and then hit on the counter-attack. But I think some of their actual possession from open play has been quite good lately. They've tried to maintain possession in midfield a little bit better. Miguel Acosta, that holding midfielder role we've talked about, just isn't his natural position. He's really coming into a bit of a game, and I think the unfortunate part for that is with the transfer window coming up, I think the number 6, as we've talked before, is their top priority. But with Miguel Acosta playing in that number 6 role, and the 2 attacking midfielders ahead of him have been more or less Ollie Bassett and Noah Verhoeven. And they're all starting to just gel a little bit better. And I think that's going to help as the sort of second half of the season approaches, Anthony. That more familiarity. Noah coming in, obviously, new this year. It was always going to take a little bit of time for him to get up to speed with how, Coach Gonzalez wants to play. And I just think so far so good. They're getting there, and it could mean that once, that the sort of meaty part of the season comes around in the next 4, 5, 6 weeks during the transfer window, I think it's looking all right for Ottawa. But 2 huge games. You've got Forge, as you said, on Sunday, and then the following Friday, or that Friday, they take on Pacific out west. And it's going to be a really good indication of how this Ottawa team has rebounded from a poor start with these 2 games coming up in Hamilton and out west.
You kind of talked about how, Ottawa, Forge beat Ottawa beat Vancouver beat Forge. There has been, you mentioned Pacific, but outside of that, there's been a lot of parity this season. And you do wonder, just from a neutral perspective, I think we're probably in store for some really tight playoff races down the stretch. Yeah. And from a league perspective, I mean, it should at least make for some good viewing.
Well, I think that's why they went with 5 playoff spots this year, was to keep the interest in more cities once you got to the last few weeks of the season. And it's playing out that way it is. I mean, as it is right now with Vancouver, with that win against Forge, they're now only 1 point behind Ottawa. I think second place all the way down to 8th place is only 5 points. I mean, 16 down to 11 or 16 down to 10, something along those lines. It's only Pacific that is stretching away. So York started difficult. They had a tough start to their season. They picked up lately. A big loss, unfortunately, for them against Pacific in their last match, just kind of sort of halted their march up the table. But they're still sitting good in second place. And right behind them, you start looking at the logjam of teams that are all trying to push each other out of the way for those top 5 spots. So I think it will be a fascinating next 3 or 4 weeks. And once the transfer window does open, Anthony, and teams have a chance to bring in and improve, whether it's at the back or whether it's an attack or whether it's even goalkeeping in some cases, you've got to make sure that you get these signings right. You can't just be bringing in players for the sake of spending money or bringing players in for the sake of paying salaries. You've got to make sure that what your needs are addressed in this transfer window. Ottawa, certainly, we know they need a 6. With Malcolm Shaw being away at the Gold Cup now with TNT, he's going to be a big miss, and Ottawa's going to be basically looking, I think, for another striker. Fernando Lopez, the general manager, just a couple of days ago put out a somewhat cryptic tweet that the fan base was sort of excited about. It was basically number 2 times, it was a pen, so obviously signings, and that equaled a rocket, which would be indicating to take off. So we're hoping that they get announced fairly soon, fairly early in the transfer window, and Ottawa does address the 6 and the 9, or the 6 and the other striker role that they've been crying out for since the season started. And who knows where things are going to. But I'm sure other teams are going to be in the same boat. I'm sure Forge will be looking to make some signings. And a team like Pacific, even though they're at the top of the table right now and looking really good, looking really comfortable as far as how they play, I think they're going to be looking to strengthen as well. You've got Vancouver. And I've got to say a word about Vancouver. I mean, I think last night against Forge, their average age was something like 21.6. So I tell you, it was less than 22. And that, to pull off a result like that for your first home win is outstanding, and fair play to them for sticking at it. Obviously, they've got one or two players that might be away on international duty at different tournaments around the world. But the fact of the matter is, they had a very young squad against Ottawa, only lost 1-0, albeit it wasn't until the final 5 minutes before they really sort of started playing in the Ottawa third, in the attacking third for them. But does it matter? Callum Irving was outstanding with a couple of fantastic saves that kept it at 1-0. And when you're late in the game at 1-0 and you're only a goal behind, you've got a chance off a set play, anything along those lines. And unfortunately, Vancouver couldn't finish it off with a tie. But bounced back extremely well with that huge win, as you mentioned, against Forge last night. So it's terrific how this league is starting to shape up. You always want to have a dominant team. You always want to have a team that everybody else has to match themselves up against. The first 4 years, we know who it's been. It's been those shirts that have been behind you hanging up on your wall. But now it's Pacific all of a sudden. It seemed to be a little bit more of the class of the league so far. We talked about their two centre-backs being outstanding, and I think they've been two of the better centre-back pairings over the course of last season for sure. They're starting to get goals. They're starting to get good, consistent play, and that's all you can ask for of a team that's sitting at top of the CPL. But the fact that you've now got Vancouver winning, Ottawa starting to get some wins, Halifax with a big win on the weekend, it's great to see, and fingers crossed that it continues over the rest of the CPL season.
It's interesting too, because one thing that's challenging, and the challenges of building a roster in this league, there's obviously financial limitations, but it's one thing to build a lineup. But then have to focus on, well, we also need depth, right? And depth it can be a tough sell to a player sometimes. I mean, does a player want to come in? Yeah. Again, you bring up the financial limitations, then you're, potentially sitting on it. It's hard to build a full roster with kind of top to bottom talent. Yeah. But to your point, the transfer window opens, maybe there's an opportunity there. And you wonder, as the season goes on, is that when teams start to kind of separate, as all of a sudden the depth starts getting tested, Yep. There's injuries, there's international duty. And then maybe that's when you start seeing kind of the contenders separate themselves.
And the flip side of that is that you have to hope that, certainly as a fan base, you certainly hope that you're able to hold on to the top players that you have. I mean, obviously right. Ottawa lost Abalu Tabla in the off-season, and that, the indication was always there it was going to happen. He was using the CPL to sort of find his game again. I think more or less find his love of the game again, because for a couple of seasons it just really hadn't seemed to go on well for him. You look at one or two players that are on rosters all around the CPL right now, I'm sure teams are going to hope that we've got to be able to hold on to him. We can't let him go. He's one of our better players. But if another team comes in for him, or maybe even some MLS teams that might be looking at some depth to say, you know what, we think this guy's had an outstanding, first half of the season or first third of the season. Let's put an offer in for him during the transfer window and see how things go with regards to the shoe being on the other foot for CPL teams instead of them, looking to bring players in. So you've got both sides of the coin. You've got to try and make sure you got a fine balance. Yes, it's nice to sell players and get money and bring money in and what have you. But the fact of the matter is, you've got still, even though it's only a 28-game season, Anthony, we've still got over halfway to go and lots to play for with those 5 playoff spots. I had a quick look at the playoff bracket sort of midweek there just to take a quick look and see. It is sort of, it's different. It's almost like a curling page system where 1v2, one goes right to the final, and then 4v5, and then you've got the rest of it playing out that way. But it doesn't matter. I mean, somebody came up with it, somebody obviously signed off on it, and that's what we have. Everybody knew what was going to happen before the season started, and now you've just got to make sure, you'd want to be 1, worst case scenario 2, but you don't want to be 6, 7, 8 here in season 5 of the CPL. You've got to make sure you get into a top 5 playoff spot, and I think we're going to see some absolutely fascinating football over the next 14, 15 weeks.
All right, I think it's a perfect place to leave it. Gordon Smith, color commentator for Atlético Ottawa on TSN 1200, which if people, I'm sure it's available on streaming. Mm-hmm. So for fans, even
Yeah.
Forge fans, who if they don't have access to One Soccer, maybe they're
Right.
just not near not near Wi-Fi, whatever the case may be, they can check out TSN 1200 and listen to the game.
Yeah, just go to TSN 1200 website, and then there will be a link to it right there on the website, and we would love to have folk listening into us, and hopefully give us some positive feedback with regards to how things are going. But the fact of the matter is, my partner AJ and I, we're just so passionate. They're both always about football, and I think that's the one thing that you've got all across the country is that, certainly I don't know how many other radio broadcasts there are, Anthony. I know when AJ...
Yeah, it's a good question.
I know when AJ was out at the Island Games, he ended up doing the Forge games once Ottawa had been eliminated, and I think he did even during the sort of regular part of the season was able to do the Forge games, and he really enjoyed that as well. So it would be interesting to find out how many other teams of the other 7 teams actually do have a local, because we do tend to talk a lot about, One Soccer and football TV as sort of being the only avenue, and the sort of big ones like TSN and Rogers and what have you, sort of, forgetting about the CPL. Well, we're not. I mean, we're at every home game. We're broadcasting every single home game, and it's nice for people that don't have access to the One Soccer or to football that are able to listen in to our game and our commentary and get a real feel for the game, because you obviously hear the fans and you hear the crowd and you hear the energy even coming through the transistor radio, so to speak, and it's fantastic. So yeah, if you get a chance, I certainly appreciate the plug there for having folk listen in, and if you're unable to watch the game, and by all means listen in to us on TSN 1200.
Absolutely. And I mean, soccer on the radio, it's a treat because it's not easy.
No,
it's not easy. And but you also get into kind of the intricacies of the game, the match that you wouldn't normally get by watching it.
Yeah,
it's kind of like it's like a 3D version of, in a weird way. It kind of takes you to a different dimension of the match that you wouldn't normally get.
Yeah, it's far more descriptive. I mean, you have to, from everything down to, far, near, left, right, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Nobody's watching what's happening, and you're just sort of, hearing the commentator sort of guide you through events, whereas, you're listening to it with no picture. You really have to paint the picture in the listener's mind, and that's hopefully what HA and I do on our broadcasts.
Awesome. All right, we look forward to it. Gordon Smith, thank you so much.
Pleasure as always, my man.
I say it all the time, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again, because I know we will, actually.
Yeah. There's still at least one game left, and who knows, there may be a playoff game coming up as well. So actually 2 games.
Absolutely.
Two regular season games, I think, left. Is that right? Or is this a third one?
I think this...
Yeah.
No.
No, is this the second one?
Because there was a Canadian Championship.
Yeah, the Canadian Championship one, I think, is what mixed me up there. But I think there's still 2 league ones to go, and who knows, hopefully a playoff one, but we'll have to see how the season
I think
plays.
there's this one, and then there's another one in August.
That's right.
So there you go.
Yeah.
We are definitely going to talk to you again.
Oh, no, there is. Yeah, because I'm planning on coming down to Hamilton in August. I've got the week after the August long weekend, so I am planning to come down to Hamilton, and we will definitely catch in the game. So hopefully we get an opportunity to sit and watch the game together. It's not Ottawa Hamilton right enough, but it'll be a Forge game that I'd love to sit and watch at Tim Hortons Place, that's for sure.
All right, 3 keys to the match for Forge FC taking on Atlético Ottawa on Sunday. Key number 1, dig deep. Listen, this team knows what it needs to do. It knows how to score. It knows how to win. More than any other roster in the lineup, this team has what it takes. No roster is more proven. They just need to find it. It's there. We know it's there. They know it's there. That's why it's frustrating, because they just haven't been able to find it yet, but it's there. They just need to dig deep and find it, which leads us to key number 2. Just one. All it might take. No, not might. All it will take to get out of this rut, especially in regards to the lack of scoring. One shot, one pass, one run, one header, one free kick, one tackle even, one big save, one throw-in. We talk about it all the time. What does Bobby Smirniotis tell us? The most important moment of any match is a throw-in. what he means is every result is a result of these small parts of the game that seem small in the moment, but end up dictating the momentum of a match. All it will take, this isn't as big as it seems. And it probably, for a player, it probably feels like there's a lot of weight on you, but it's not that big. All it's going to take is one seemingly small moment to completely turn the tide. Just one. Key number 3 for Forge FC, fan focus. What an opportunity. What an opportunity to recharge, reset. You're back at home, right? You're sleeping in your own bed. You're in front of your own fans. There's orange everywhere. Your logo's plastered all over the stadium. As much as this feels, again, like there's a lot of weight, especially if you're a player who's used to excellence. And look, I mean, we can get even deeper here. The reality is the pressure being felt by these players, it's not just about wins and losses. I mean, this is their livelihood. It's their careers. A off season could dictate a player's career. I mean, it's a big deal. I mean, we cannot just even just saying it's about wins and losses minimizes the real impact of these matches on these players. It is their livelihood. And that's a lot of pressure. And that makes things even more difficult when you're trying to get out of a rut. An opportunity, though, on Sunday. Take it all in, right? This does not have to be all on your shoulders if you're an individual player. You look around, sometimes the best thing when you're struggling is you want to feel supported. You want to feel a sense of community. There's something very uplifting about that. And that is the opportunity these players have on Sunday. Look around, make eye contact with these fans, connect with the faces in the stands. There is so much support behind them. And now that they're back home, they can actually feel it, embrace it, focus on the fans. Those are your 3 keys. All that's left now is to get the job done. And I'll say it again because I'm so confident in my, not so much a prediction, but okay, maybe a prediction. I feel like Sunday they are going to take a major step in getting out of this rut. And it's going to happen at Tim Hortons Field in front of the hometown fans. Nothing motivates this team more, it seems, than seeing Atlético Ottawa. And they're going to get that opportunity on the weekend. So you can be there, forgefc.ca/tickets. And don't forget, as soon as you hear that final whistle, head on over to the Forge FC. It could be YouTube. It could be our Twitter. It could be our Facebook. Wherever you want to head to, get there and you will get instant post-whistle reaction. An instant match in review. It's coming your way on Sunday immediately after that final whistle. So enjoy, and we're going to talk to you soon.
Forge FC is prepared, and now you are informed. This has been Match Day Preview with Anthony Urciuoli on the Forge Audio Network. Subscribe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.